All right, shalom and welcome to our new moon celebration. And a new moon is a new month. I know, as the brother just said, Shabbat Shalom. We kind of get used to gathering here on the Shabbat, and it's a little bit different when you still gotta go to work. You still got to do all the other things that we have to do here in the Daughter of Babylon, and then still uh, make sure that we do the things that are pleasing unto Yahweh. Um, Believe it or not, this is a part of our curse because our forefathers had absolutely nothing else to do. I don't. I think we get so accustomed to having to do this and run to work. You got to run back home. You got to grab the stuff that you're supposed to bring or what have you. Me and Kish have to put together class, then jump back up in here. That's a part of our curse. Understand something? The pagan leaders, hey man, they don't do nothing from Sunday to Sunday. They do what they want to do within that week's time. So us having to do all of these things, we get so accustomed to some things that we don't really understand. You know it ain't supposed to be like this, right? We're not supposed to have to run here and run there. If you ever end up near one of those Jewish communities, it would do you good to go in that area around Friday and see how they operate. I mean, everything shut down early. And the stuff that they going to go buy and do, it is for the Sabbath. They are preparing, they cooking, they doing everything. I mean, even those that have businesses, they shut down so early preparing for the Sabbath. But they have accumulated wealth. They have accumulated some things. So it's not even a question whether or not they're going to do such and such. But us getting kind of caught in the hustle and bustle of trying to do our day-to-day things, we forget that even when we look to our fathers and the things that they did, when you talk about the situation with Dawid, if he wasn't at new moon, it was automatically saying, oh, something must be wrong with him. Oh, he must be unclean, or something happened. I mean, it was automatically. Now he running from his for his life, but it was just expected that he would be there. And when you deal with the most of Israel, more than half of them have no idea what a new moon is. But we doing as many forums and as many things as possible, but find out what they're doing on a new moon, and it never even crossed their mind. So we go through this from time to time to make sure that we have a good understanding of what the new moon is, because you will go to people, even the Jewish, as much stuff as they do. You'll run up on one of them and ask them about a new moon, and they'll look at you sideways. Say, what is that? What do you mean, what is that? We can't count our holy days. We can't deal with any of those things without dealing with the new moon. So what that means is somebody in the organization always deals with the new moon. They just don't pass that down to other people. And what that is a system of being ruled over. You need to understand how these things are being done. What happened if, we make a mistake? What happened if we don't show up? Do you now not know any of those things? So it's something that we need to have, because we take it for granted that we're all going to, be together, for the duration of everything that we got to go through. But what if Yahweh send you left and send everybody else right? Then he's going to expect all of that stuff that you've been taught. Now it's your turn. And when we deal with the sisters, there's a part when we go through this book where it says the house of Dawid and their wives apart. The house of this brother and their wives apart. when it gets to that time where the men are separated from the women for these holy things that have to be done, are you ready to stand your ground in speaking this word? You can't just, throw it off to your husband, because he won't be there. He'll be separated to go and do something else. And those people that you see out on the corner, they got wives too. And their wives gonna be all in y'all face. They got daughters. They got nieces. They all gonna be all in your face. So you're gonna have to be ready to answer for this word. Let's start with 1 Chronicles chapter 23. And in the back, we're going to jump around. So I'm going to tell you which graphic to go to. 1 Chronicles 23, and let's read 27 through 32.
For by the last words of Dawid, the Levites were numbered from 20 years old and above, because their office was to wait on the sons of Aaron for the service of the house of Yah, in the courts and in the chambers, and in the purifying of all holy things, and the work of the service of the house of Elohim, both for the showbread, and for the fine flour for meat offering, and for the unleavened cakes, and for that which is baked in the pan, and for that which is fried, and for all manner of measure and size, and to stand every morning to thank and praise Yahweh, and likewise at even, and to offer all burnt sacrifices, unto Yahweh in the Shabbats, in the new moons, and on the set feasts, by number according to the order commanded unto them, continually before Yahweh.
Right. So although we get to sometimes getting to this dealing with the new moon, and sometimes you have people say Sabbath, but you have to consider it is a holy situation. You have all of Israel stopping what they're doing to keep that new moon. So it is definitely one of those things, especially when we're dealing in the daughter of Babylon, and we have to gather. That's why sometimes it feels like a Sabbath, and people kind of put it that way. It is something that was very, very important unto Yahweh, and you see he had set forth order as to who's going to do what, when these things are going to be done, and the new moon was a part of that. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1. So we're going to jump to graphic 5.
Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning Elohim created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. And Elohim said, Let there be light, and there was light. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim divided the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
The evening and the morning were the day. So then we see that it began in darkness. This is the separation. This is why every time we deal with our holy days, our new moons, our Sabbaths, they're going to begin in the darkness as that day changes. Because as we have said before, this is your cleanest state. You are the cleanest you're going to be right now. This is a brand new day. You have done absolutely nothing stupid yet. You are completely clean today. So that's why people don't understand that the whole setup of keeping those holy days right at the change of that day. This is the holiest you ever gonna be today. See, I don't know what you're gonna do when we start doing, handing out the food. I don't know what y'all gonna do when you go out of here. But I know one thing right now. You all right? There's a little bit of, serious method to why Yahweh does what he does. Go ahead.
Verse 6. And Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And Elohim made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And Elohim called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And Elohim said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together onto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so.
The seed is in itself. This is how the herbs are supposed to reproduce and bring more herb. It's supposed to have this seed in it. And we have been tricked in this land to believe that the good stuff is seedless. So you'll go places and they'll have these advertisements, seedless this and seedless that. And before, I didn't know no better. I thought it was something, because we forgot how things were when we were little. You didn't encounter, something without a seed. But then when this thing is put to you like it's a convenience, you start dealing with it and not understanding that in itself is going against the plan of Yahweh. He has said right off the rip that these things are supposed to have seeds. So when they present something to us that does not have a seed, we don't really consider that evil. But it is. It says, Yahweh says, he made man upright, but man has made many inventions. So then we start to figure out things, and then we started, going with that. But there's something that's seriously wrong in the earth with these things. I had seen it, and Brother Elijah had sent the email about the y'all seen the ice storm in Mexico? Now they had to be thoroughly confused. It is July in Mexico. Now you know how many people who probably paid money to go on vacation and ran into an ice storm. And man, this wasn't no regular ice storm. I mean, this was like the strangest looking thing. It looked like they were driving through a river, okay, with all of this stuff that's out there. This is the place where they're supposed to be, going to get their tan on, and they show up and they in waist high ice in Mexico. There are some really, really strange things that are happening. And we're talking about, they were saying it was like 60 degrees right before that. And then ice everywhere, just out of nowhere. There's something seriously wrong here. But what ends up happening is Yahweh does things in spurts, and then he backs off. This is what gives us the belief that we've gotten away with certain things, and that, nothing's really going to happen, because he steps in, he does something, and then he backs up. But then eventually the things start happening more and more frequent and more frequent. And the issue is, do we notice when the change happens? As it is written, during the times of Noah, they were partying, marrying, giving their children into marriage, doing everything until the bottom fell out. But somebody knew the whole time that it was coming up to that. But everybody else just went on about their business. And that's that thing. When we think we have more time, we actually always end up being late. being behind something. You are better off when you don't believe you have all of this time. The people who are closest to something always end up being the people who are normally the latest. The folks across the street from school always late to school. The folks down the street from the job always late to the job. Why? Because they keep thinking they got more time. They keep thinking they got more. And by believing that, you keep getting later and later and later. Same thing with righteousness. You keep thinking you got some time, so you keep pushing it back. Keep thinking you got some time, so you keep pushing it back. The only problem is all of that stuff is mounting up. And when it comes that day to come and deal with it, now you got too much to deal with. Go ahead.
Verse 12. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And Elohim said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years.
So this is then how we govern our time right from this point. We have to understand that these things are given unto Moshe. All of these things have already happened. He was not alive. He did not see any of this. These things take place. It was given unto him. He is then repeating it. So what Yahweh wanted him to deal with, that's what he gave the angel. Now, people say, well, do you know if there were any other things? No, I don't know. And anybody tell you that they do, they lying to you too. Could have been all kind of things happen. Yahweh said, all right, I'm going to tell you what I want you to look, write it down right here. That's it. That's what he wanted you to deal with. That don't mean that something else didn't happen. He may have said, yeah, I could tell you that story, but you're going to get yourself into some trouble. So never mind that. Go to this. Go ahead.
That was it, verse 14.
All right. Let's go to, go to the next graphic, number 7. When we deal with what's in verse 14, and let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. When we deal with what happens with the earth, we deal with that this earth is orbiting around the sun, and it takes a year to make that orbit. As it goes through this orbit, you're going to notice in the graphic that the earth tilts either toward or away from the sun. This then gives us our change, and you notice that it's not a complete circle. So at times it's going to be closer to the sun as well. So with everything that Yahweh gave us in verse 14, for your days, your seasons, your days and your years, as it goes into this orbit around the sun, this is where our seasons change. So they don't just magically change. They're changing because of the orbit around the sun. So you have basically these rotations and orbits that are doing everything that is in verse 14. So you have the earth going in its own rotation. So it is going to rotate either toward or away from the sun. That's why one part is going to be day and the other part is going to be night. So this takes care of our day. We then have the moon that orbits, that goes around here, the earth. This is our month. So then you have the earth and its orbiting moon going all the way around the sun. That is your year. So you have your day, your month, and your year, all dealt with in verse 14. So that we see that there's this some setup for, you can just read verse 14, but without having the understanding of these other things, a lot of times people just say, well, he magically did these things. Once he set them up, it is now set up as a law upon the earth that this has to go this way. Go to the next graphic. That's going to be number 8. Now, if you think about these seasons, right? So Yahweh also said in verse 14 that these things are about seasons. If you think what the heathen does, almost all of their worship is around these seasons. You're going to find that their holy days are on equinoxes or solstices. So Yahweh gave them to us for the seasons, but he didn't tell us to worship it. But we are supposed to understand how it came about, but it's not supposed to be worship. Brother, read the note on graphic 8.
The moon has a nearly circular orbit. It takes the moon 27.322 days to go around the earth once. Because of this motion, the moon appears to move about 13 degrees against the stars each day, or about 1.5 degrees per hour.
All right, so that should make sure that they are. Go to the next graphic behind that one. There you go. Go ahead.
If you watch the moon over the course of several hours one night, you will notice that its position among the stars will change by a few degrees.
Now, just looking at this one before we go to the next one, the lit part here in the middle, that is the earth from your vantage point. The part where it says sunlight, this is where the sun is coming in. You're going to then see there's a lit part of the moon, but it is not in your vantage point. If you look from the lit part of the earth, you're seeing a completely dark moon. That is the new moon. That is when the sun, the moon, and the earth are in alignment. That means they are in one line. That's why it's dark. There's always going to be a part of the moon that's lit. It is just depending on which part you can see. So even on a new moon, there's a whole part of the moon lit. It's just on the other side. You just can't see it. So as this orbit goes, we're going to then see those things change. This gives us our phases. So right now, of course, we don't, really look at those things like that. We have phones that tell us what the day is, what the hour is, what the everything is. So we use that for everything. But when we were little, we used to just lay back on the cars and just look up at the stars, look at the moon all the time. And back then I didn't even really know what the phases meant, but I knew there were phases. I just didn't know what they meant. This is something that we're going to have to pay attention to. As this thing goes, you have the waxing crescent, then you have first quarter. If you pay attention, the phases grow on which side first? That's how you know you're in the beginning of the month, because you're going to see the right side of the moon lit. When you get to the middle of the month, that's going to be the full moon, so you're going to see the whole part of the moon lit. As it starts getting toward the end of the month, which side of the moon is lit? Left. So you're going to see it change. So you can just watch this go and know where we are. That may not mean a whole lot to us right now, But I promise, when we get out of the daughter of Babylon and you get ready to try to figure some things out, and we got to go from place to place, I guarantee you, you might not remember not nary scripture. You gonna want to remember this. You gonna want to remember, because if somebody say we need to be at such and such place by such and such, we ain't got no watch. How we know when we gonna meet? By that big light up there. Understand, our folks escaped from bondage looking up in the sky. And we don't know anything about it. You have any idea how scary it's got to be to walk through the woods in the pitch black? You do know there was a woman leading them, right? Now we got women to be like, oh, come kill this bug. Wait a minute. This was a sister leading big, strong men in the dark in bushes. They got dogs after them. And she's guiding by the stars and the moon. But we got sisters that won't step on a bug. Right. Go ahead, bro.
The changing position of the moon with respect to the sun leads to lunar phases.
Keep going.
Measuring the motion of the moon around the earth relative to the distant star leads us to what is called the sidereal period. The sidereal period is the time required for a celestial body within our solar system to complete one revolution with respect to the fixed stars, i.e., as observed from some fixed point outside the system. The sidereal period of the moon is the time needed for it to return to the same position against the background of stars.
So what's happening is the moon is on its orbit. The earth is on its orbit, but what's happening is everything is moving. So this is why you have two different equations that have to be taken into consideration, because it's not something that's standing still. If it was Kish walking around me and I'm standing still, then that's going to be one given point. But if I keep moving, then it's going to affect where Kish is based on my movement. Go ahead.
The moon appears to move completely around the celestial sphere once in about 27.3 days as observed from the Earth. This is called a sidereal month. It represents the orbital period of the moon around the Earth.
Now, if you guys ever watch the History Channel and they start going through all of these, the pyramids and all of these things, you'll find out that they were charting the stars. They're charting. I mean, they're really into it. They built these monuments for all of these things, and some of them they still can't figure out how they calculated some of the things that they calculated to even build these things to deal with all of the things that were going on in the heavens. Now, of course, they didn't went a little bit too far with that, because then they start worshiping it. But when you read, Yahweh says, I gave them up to worship the host of heaven. He said, I didn't give that to you. He said, I left them alone. I knew what they were going to do. They saw stuff that they couldn't explain, and they started worshiping it. But he said, I didn't give that to you. I gave you what you were supposed to deal with. That's why when we do it, it is exceedingly sinful. Yahweh is more upset when we do it than when the nations do it. Now that seems unfair to us, that the other nations can do things and get away with it. But he knows what he gave the children of Israel, so we have to take those things into consideration. Where are you?
11, pick 11.
All right. Make sure you guys are at graphic 11. Go ahead.
Measuring the motion of the moon around the earth relative to the sun leads us to what is called the synodic period. The synodic period is the time required for a body within the solar system, such as a planet, the moon, or an artificial Earth satellite, to return to the same or approximately the same position relatively to the sun as seen by an observer on the Earth. The moon's synodic period is the time between successive recurrences of the same phase, between full moon and full moon, as an example. The moon takes 29.5 days to return to the same point on the celestial sphere as reference to the sun because of the motion of the earth around the sun. This is called a synodic month.
So this is what we are dealing with, and when you deal with this 29.5, you have to see some genius in how Yahweh does things, because there are all kinds of worship things by Hebrews, by the way. When I was in Christendom, and I, referenced dumb, we didn't deal with none of this, but we were supposed to be unintelligent at that point. Now you got these so-called intelligent Hebrews, and now they have 30-day months exactly, because they have to go by this so-called made-up calendar, but it won't work. So then they have to make up days and take away days. See, there's some genius in how Yahweh does some things, and you don't really get it right away. Go to graphic 12, and brother, read those definitions.
Urayak, from the same as H3391, the moon.
And why we even go through that, because after having some encounters with certain individuals, it's certain things they're going to try to question, and why you need to know certain things. Because I've seen people have been in the Word for years. Before you know it, they ended up worshiping one of those moving holy days. And I'm talking about these people was in the Word when I got there. So don't think that it's just one of those things. Oh, that ain't nothing I got to worry about. We're talking about folks that have been in the Word like 10 years. And somebody came with something sounding new, and it sounded, oh my God, this is feng shui. Before you know it, boom, they gone. Absolute. Before you know it, they can't keep any of Yahweh's holy days. Next thing you know, they pulled off from one. Then they pulled off from another and pulled off from another. And all because they were given one thing. That one thing of this is how you're going to do your calendar. Genesis 1:14 told you how you're going to do your calendar. But because they first bit at that one thing, everything else went downhill. Go ahead.
H2320, Kadesh, from H2318, which means Hebrew. The new moon, by implication, a month, monthly new moon.
So then a new moon is a new month. We then have Kodesh. Urayak is the moon. And why you need to know Kodesh, because there are people that says it couldn't have been a new moon, so it would have been another word before Kodesh. So there's a reason why we wanted to make sure that is in there. Go to the next graphic.
Years. If a year was always considered to be 365 days, the calendar would effectively slip one day forward every 4 years. After 360 years of that system, the calendar would be 90 days off from the true season.
90 days. Yahweh said that each and every last one of our holy days must be kept in its season. So we can't have holy days that jump around out of season. We're offering first fruit. You can't offer first fruit in the snow. Go ahead.
Winter would end in June rather than in March if a calendar assumed a moon cycle to be 29 or 30 days rather than 29 and a half.
You see how the half will cause absolute pandemonium when you decide you're just not going to deal with it? Go ahead.
It will become 6 days off in 1 year, completely useless.
Now, when you deal with the day of Ramadan, because it is only by the moon, it will jump all around their year. It does not stay in one season. Passover will always be in the same season. Ramadan will be in any season. It will be in this season 1 year. It'll be in this season another year, because it's going directly by the moon. Genesis 1 and verse 14, Yahweh told you. A lot of times you hear people talk and they say, we have a lunar calendar. No, we don't. We have a lunar / solar calendar. We have to take all of those things into consideration, because if you just use the sun or you just use the moon, you are still going to be off. You have to use everything that Yahweh gave us there. Let's jump to graphic number 16. So we're going to go to Exodus chapter 12.
Exodus chapter 12 and verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you.
Right. So then Yahweh is telling us where our new year is going to be. Go ahead.
Speak you unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house.
So then we know that the beginning of our year is going to be in the same season as Passover. So we already see that moves us greatly away from what the heathen New Year is. Let's go to Exodus chapter 13 and start that at verse 1.
And Yahweh spake unto Moshe, saying, Sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whatsoever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and of beast, it is mine. And Moshe said unto the people, Remember this day in which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand Yahweh brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came you out in the month Abib.
Right. This day came you out in the month Abib, which is, but we're going to go through that. Keep going.
And it shall be when Yahweh shall bring you into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this month.
You shall keep this service in this month. So then your months have to be dealt with accordingly. That means you have to use the sun. Why do I keep mentioning that? You're going to run into some Hebrews that have a real problem with dealing with where you pick your beginning. They don't like dealing with this whole thing of dealing with March 21st or March 22nd. They want to deal with just the growth of produce and say, then we're going to call this the beginning of our year, because they said, well, we know some people in Israel, so we'll call them and see when stuff is growing, and that's how we'll pick our year. This is how we're going to decide that. And I pose a question to them. So when they have first fruit in Israel, does that mean you're going to have first fruit here? Do your stuff grow here at the same time it grew in Israel? So if that's what you're using, where your offering come from? And how many generations would our people be off until we got this internet? Go ahead.
Verse 6. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to Yahweh. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with you, neither shall there be leaven seen with you in all your quarters. And you shall show your son in that day, saying, This is done because of that which Yahweh did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be for a sign unto you upon your hand, and for a memorial between your eyes, that Yahweh's law may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand has Yahweh brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year.
Right. And Yahweh mentions this thing of bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt because it was a very great and glorious thing that he got a lot of glory from. And we have to think about how much glory is Yahweh going to get when he shows the world who this so-called Negro is. And it's the worst kept secret because everybody knows except us. We are like the last one. That's why we want to have pet rallies every week, because we're so excited. So because we have found this thing out. Here's the thing. They've been known. What they're trying to figure out, who told you? Who told you? They've been known. All you have to do is start talking to some people and you find out, y'all been knowing this long? But consider their position. Let's say they had walked up to, a regular black person and say, you're a Jew. You, in your old state, might have tried to fight them white people. Who you going to do? You going to be a what? You might have tried to fight them. So here it is. They know who you are, but they had to sit back. No, this ain't. This could go any old kind of way. I don't know if this is going to be a good situation. So a lot of times you have to show people that you know who you are. Then they'll deal with you for who you are. But only after you acknowledge that you know. Go ahead. That was it. Go to graphic 18 and read that.
Abib, from H24, from an unused root, meaning to be tender, green, that is, a young ear of grain, hence the name of the month Abib or Nisan. Abib, ear.
Now you know that Nisan, this is where you finna start getting into their pagan names. And believe you me, they got pagan names for every last one of these months. Every last one of them. And you're going to start running into some names right off the rip. You're going to know, wait a minute. This paganism. So understand when you start getting into these names, Abib means green, that is young ear of grain. We then know that this is the beginning of this growth is happening between March and April. If you go back to where the rotation is, you saw the different points in that rotation of that orbit of the earth around the sun. That's where those growth points are going to be. This is where these things are going to happen. This is where Yahweh starts moving the children of Israel. So we don't know. He has a tendency to do things in the same manner. This is why certain things, I say, it may behoove us to know certain things very well. Not having to quote every scripture, doing that. No, knowing certain aspects about some stories, because he has a tendency to repeat the thing that he has done before. And that may be how he ends up directing the children of Israel. Because if you start remembering different parts and say, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. You might be standing somewhere and say, wait a minute, didn't it? You know what, I bet he finna do such and such and such. I bet. And that may be how the Spirit starts directing. All right, go. So that's all that we're going to do for tonight. Enjoy your new moon. Shalom.
Shalom.